Clank clack clack underscore, Kelson placed a large box of Lego and a complete set of paints on the table, smiling at Esther and saying, "My dear, this is the gift that your father and mother chose for you. Congratulations on joining our family today. What do you think? Do you like it?" The little girl with brown hair and fair skin, wearing a black felt coat, shyly hugged the two gifts to her chest, raised her head with a face full of gratitude and joy, and smiled sweetly at Kelson. "Thank you, Father, I like it very much." Then turned her head to look at Ray. "Thank you, Mother." "It's okay, dear, as long as you like it." Ray patted her head. "From now on, we're family, you don't have to be as constrained as before." Siddle sat alone on the sofa. Next to her was the Annabelle doll that was a bit big for her. At this moment, she felt a little embarrassed. After all, she was the only one in the family who didn't prepare a welcome gift. However, this wasn't a big deal. Esther seemed to be a friendly girl. She could add a gift later. She thought about it, then suddenly met Esther's gaze, and smiled a ladylike smile. She asked in a low voice, "Is this doll a gift Siddle gave you?" Esther's sparkling eyes looked straight at Annabelle, looking very fond of it. She put down the gift in her hand and walked over to touch it. "Wait." Siddle's hand was faster than his brain, and he instinctively stopped Esther's hand from reaching out. "You can't touch this." After she finished speaking, she realized that she seemed to have gone a bit too far, so she stood up in frustration, not knowing if she had scared Esther. For Siddle, Annabelle was the kind of thing filled with a sinister aura that should be locked away in the basement storage room immediately. For some reason, she always had an instinct to avoid this doll, so she didn't want her family to have any contact with it. When she entered the house, her father wanted to help her carry this wooden box, but Siddle refused without hesitation. But before Siddle could explain, Esther, who was standing in front of her, slowly withdrew her hand, lowering her eyes that were as sparkling as black grapes. "Sorry, I shouldn't have touched your things so casually. Just because I think this doll is as beautiful as a work of art, I've never owned such a beautiful doll before." "Siddle. This doll is beautiful." She couldn't help but look back at Annabelle's thick crimson lips, her evil smile, and the scar on her face. This kind of toy that seemed to come from the underworld, would really have someone like it? She didn't understand, she really didn't understand. Esther trotted towards Kelson, her mood slightly gloomy. She leaned close to Kelson intimately, lowered her head, and returned to her shy and afraid of stranger appearance just now. "Siddle," Ray's mother called her sternly. Siddle quickly sat up straight, seeing Ray's reproachful gaze. "Yes." Kelson hadn't spoken to Siddle yet. He hesitated for a moment, and a little unnaturally comforted the little girl who was leaning against him. "Do you like Siddle's doll? Esther, if we have time, we can go to the toy store this afternoon." Siddle had always been a well-behaved and sensible child, and this was Kelson's first experience of coaxing a child, and he couldn't help but feel reserved, afraid that he would say the wrong thing. "Siddle." It seemed like she hadn't said anything harsh. But thinking about Esther's background, Siddle sighed inwardly. After all, she had the heart of a 20-year-old older sister, and couldn't be compared to a 9-year-old girl in an orphanage. Siddle frankly explained to Esther, "I'm sorry, sister. Did I scare you just now? I'm very sorry, but the owner of that doll isn't me. I can't give it to you." Esther was still hiding in Kelson's arms, only slightly showing her face, the black coat highlighting her small, snow-white, delicate face. The sigh in Siddle's heart immediately disappeared because of her beauty. She happily suggested, "If you accept my apology, can I take you on a tour of our house as an apology gift?" Kelson smiled. Siddle had always been very smart. He stroked the curly hair of the little girl in his arms. "Darling, Siddle has put a lot of effort into decorating your bedroom. Do you want to go upstairs with your sister to take a look?" Siddle looked at Esther's timid gaze. She glanced at her sister, lowered her head again, and nodded gently twice. Esther gently took Siddle's outstretched hand. Siddle held her hand. At this moment she unconsciously frowned, the strange feeling of discomfort from before the villa door returned. "What's wrong?" She secretly glanced at the little girl beside her. Esther was looking down, Her face was calm and beautiful like a painting, clearly an orphan, but her actions and gestures were elegant and indescribable. Noticing Siddle's appraising gaze, Esther turned to look, smiling politely. Siddle suppressed the unpleasant feeling in her heart, and also smiled sweetly at Esther. Regardless, this was her older sister, she couldn't just casually suspect Esther based on this baseless intuition. Seeing the two children holding hands going upstairs, Ray smiled. Siddle is a bit unusual today, but she should be able to get along well with Esther. Of course, Kelson shrugged, sat down next to Ray, and put his arm around his wife's shoulder. You know, our little princess has always been very smart. That's right, Ray said softly, her eyes glancing past her husband, looking straight at the white flowers blooming outside the window. If my Delina were alive, Siddle would have been a very good sister. Honey, Kelson hugged Ray, it's been 3 years, maybe you should be happy. I understand, Ray closed her eyes, now we have a daughter, don't we? Esther is obedient and smart, she will bring us new things, like love, laughter, and cheers. Kelson said softly. The couple hugged each other and sat on the sofa, the flowers outside the window swaying in the wind. That's right, Ray let go of Kelson after a while, let's put that doll in our bedroom later, it seems like Siddle doesn't like it very much. Kelson looked at the beautiful doll on the sofa, huh? I thought she really liked this doll, otherwise why would she act so outrageously towards Esther? I think the same as you, Ray said, Siddle has been very unusual all day since she saw this doll. I'm a little worried. It's true that there's something unusual, Kelson indifferently assessed the doll on the sofa, while comforting his wife, but she's just a child after all, it's normal for her to have mood swings. Maybe I can talk to her tomorrow, Ray shrugged, stood up and said, I'm going to prepare dinner. Don't worry about her, Kelson said with a smile. Maybe Siddle will forget all the troubles of today after a nap. Ray sighed, I hope so. Upstairs, Siddle was holding Esther's hand, patiently introducing the structure and layout of the villa to her, racking his brain to use humorous words to ease the stiff atmosphere between the two. But obviously it didn't work. Esther was 2 years older than her, and her figure was also much taller than her. Siddle had a hard time looking at Esther's neck. She noticed that Esther's wrists and neck were both wrapped in a black silk ribbon. She was a little curious, but thinking about the two of them still not yet close, Siddle silently swallowed the words she wanted to ask. Finally reaching Esther's room door, when Siddle was about to go in with Esther, who had been silent all this time, suddenly let go of her hand. Siddle turned her head in confusion, only to see that the brown-haired, black-eyed girl's expression was no longer gentle and quiet. As if she had turned into another person, she coldly glanced at Siddle, her eyes impatient. She opened the door first, turned her head coldly and stared at her sister. Do you really have to go in? Siddle. She really didn't expect a 9-year-old girl to be able to flip her face like flipping rice paper. She was momentarily stunned on the spot. Esther frowned slightly, not hearing Siddle's reply. She slammed the door without hesitation. Siddle. She stood there absent-mindedly. A few seconds later she realized that she was not welcome, and suddenly burst out laughing. Oh, I didn't expect this brat to be two-faced. Very good. In front of her parents she acts gentle and obedient, but behind their backs she starts to reveal her true nature. Siddle was angry not because she was not welcomed. After all, she was just a 9-year-old child. It was normal to have a sense of privacy. It was normal to not want her to enter her room. But she was not an innocent 7-year-old child. At least a girl with a mature soul like her was very clear about what kind of person Esther was. Impatient, annoyed, and disdainful. Because she was not allowed to touch that doll, she hated it to this extent. Was Esther a Disney princess? Siddle had spent half a day trying to please her beautiful sister, but in the end, she had brought trouble upon herself. She quickly returned to her room in anger, feeling like a clown. At the same time, Esther's opposite attitude also made Siddle wary. This kind of person who was one way in front of her, but another way behind her back, was she really worthy of her parents' love? She buried her face in the pillow, remembering Ray's mother's sparkling eyes when she mentioned the child they were going to adopt, that longing look. She couldn't bear to tell her parents what had just happened. Or should we just wait and see, she thought silently. This strange feeling of unease had been lingering in her mind ever since she saw Esther. And Esther's attitude undoubtedly increased Sydal's unease. That unease was like a dark cloud gathering to form a shadow in her heart.